Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 410, Taylor's Herbal, Nature the Best Remedy. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books blogs. This will go in the herbal category, of course. 50 pages, so this is a short work. And it's one of a number of very interesting herbal documents, so it's about herbal medicine. And it's just at that sweet spot where organic chemistry had come into fashion, but you don't yet get the standardization levels that you get towards the middle of the 19th century. So you have a few decades there, pre-Thomsonian and post-Thomsonian, where you get works like this. It's more rigorous and standardized than the works of the 18th century. So before then, you get, the best that you get is crude tinctures, and usually not even that. Normally you just get raw herbal components, mineral components. There's a lot of superstition carryover. Like if you look at the Petit Albert, that comes from the middle of the 18th century. You're getting basically herbal medicine and similar tips, domestic material. It leads to the rise of receipt books and grimoires. They are intertwined. These bric-a-brac works from that period, there's no real standardization. It's like put 3 eels, you don't know what size they are, in the pot and dry them over the smoke of a hickory fire. Then add rosemarium and other ingredients and star anise, and then bury it in the compost pile for a week. And then take the slime that results and apply it to your wound and you'll be healed. There's no real attempt at standardization. You don't even know the dosage. Later on, you get very rigorous dosage materials, and usually you're working with tinctures and poultices and things that are at least semi-standardized. This work is intermediate. Now, it's one of those missing link works at the very dawn of organic chemistry being a thing. Very much in style. Pretty much every apothecarian had their own herbal guide that they went to the press and they created, and they would sell it. This one ranges from herbal remedies and species that are innocuous, the use of potato mash in a poultice, to draw out poison, the use of chamomile, of course, highly medicinal. This is the pre-lobelia craze period, by the way. That starts about a decade and a half later. And then you get some cures that aren't so safe. Disclaimer, of course, you definitely should not be using foxglove for dropsy. If you're retaining water, adding digitalin to your diet may help you to evacuate some of that by restoring heart function. There are now modern inorganic supplements that are much more easier to dose and probably a lot safer. Yes, there is something to be said for the artificiality of modern pharmacy. Just saying that using Datura stramonium for your asthma is probably not as good as using an inhaler, generally speaking. Fascinating work. Highly recommended. Some good illustrations, by the way, of course, by Raven Feather Illustrations. And I would like to announce as well that this is probably the last standalone edited work that I'll make. If I release any more, it'll be sporadic, and that's because Amazon has changed the way that they do business with regards to books, if they're public domain. Before, you didn't have to have them re-illustrated. The fact that you had significantly changed it with every one of my works, new cover art, unique forward, unique interior formatting, etc., etc., etc. With this one, there's also a guide at the end for antiquated medical terminology. I redacted the old index, which isn't necessary, in favor of an explanatory few pages to tell you like some of the terms that are in, like dropsy, the retention of water. Most people don't know what dropsy is. They'd have to Google it. I put a guide in at the end for a quick perusal. Anyway, now you have to either have it footnoted or re-illustrated, which means you either, in my case, pay an illustrator, which for most projects, at least fiscally, doesn't make sense, or you have to footnote it, and I'm not going to add a bunch of footnotes to a 50-page herbal text. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, this text started off in alphabetical order, but about halfway through it abandoned that completely, so I put it in alphabetical order, so it's completely different from the original work, which I don't know. The editing process in the early 19th century wasn't necessarily as rigorous. You got to realize that these people were lettered, but they weren't professional bookmakers. They would take the material to the press, and whatever form that it was in, that was the form that it was printed in. And again, they would sell it in their shops. Very fascinating. Nice historical piece too, not just for the alternative medicine angle, just for its time period, again, that few decades where you have the concept of standardization, but not full standardization. You don't have a lot of the more more rigorous material control that you have half a century later. You don't have the recipes being like, here's the exact measurement and the number of milliliters of antimonium that you have to put in this poultice. You get more crude measurements. I kind of like works from this period better than all others. The first few decades of the 19th century, second only probably to like the 1880s, 1890s, and the anthropological craze that happened as far as my own interest. So highly recommended overall, even if it's a short work. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books blogs. I'll get the blog post up later. That's about all. Peace out.